Today we're going to be talking about the Primal pistol. This is the pistol of the Primal set, you know, the set of weapons that makes animals leave you alone, which is great. This pistol is actually surprisingly good single target damage. It's really, really good for mist monsters, big targets. It is pretty terrible at crowd clearing. There's no pierce, there's no area of effect damage, there are no explosions. But it fires 2 bullets at a time, which is pretty cool. You know, you're reloading every 4 shots, kind of, but it does so much damage to a single target that it's actually pretty viable. I recommend pairing this with any other crowd clearing weapon in the lead, maybe a bow with pierce or a shotgun with pierce, or since you want to run this with a loadout that buffs pistols and SMGs, maybe an SMG in the lead. The Blastotron Mini comes to mind. There are a lot of different ways where you could run a primary on the front end to just take care of the big crowds, and then the Primal pistol on the side, which can 1 or even 2 hit the mist monsters. It is enormously powerful for that use case. Unfortunately, as of release, these weapons are locked to nature. However, Epic has stated, or at least alluded to the idea that they might change that in the future. So I'm going to treat this like a universal weapon, even though as of recording, it is nature only. So really, really good single target damage. It's really good for taking out mist monsters, and that's kind of the shtick with this weapon. It is essentially a secondary weapon. Its entire purpose is taking out the big targets. So when we get to the perks of this weapon, we have a few things to talk about. What you're seeing on screen are what I would consider to be the standard perks. If you do not want to think about anything, the standard crit bill is going to apply. That's not going to surprise anybody, but let's get into this a bit further. Now, the fun way to play this would be like double crit damage. That's the only thing to modify. Run this with Totally Rocking Out in the lead. That would be a fun way to go. I could suggest a build like this with Beetlejuice in the lead, upping your crit damage by a ton, Totally Rocking Out, Wafers, Battle Beat, Hip Shot, all these fun things. The rest of the perks are pretty much up to you, but this kind of build would make it really, really good for double crit damage or even for normal use. Now, double crit damage is not really recommended even if you're running Totally Rocking Out. It's just a fun way to play, but I wanted to divulge from the standard perks because this will work if you want to just turn your brain off, but there are some other ways to run it. For example, the reload on this weapon is 2 seconds by default. The reload perk brings it down to 1.1, which is great, but if you run this with double damage to mist monsters and bosses, that will do a lot of damage. So you'd be giving up a little bit of reload, 0.9 seconds, and you wouldn't even really need Chaos Agents, and 2 seconds is perfectly fine, but you'd essentially be using your pistol like a sniper. So mist monster bosses doubled up could be pretty good. And another suggestion I've had from viewers on my stream is double headshot damage. Now, this weapon is tricky, all right? So I've been running crit on this just as a standard recommendation, but you are only firing 2 bullets, and then the mag size is only 8. So if you don't crit, it sucks, okay? You're only critting 38% of the time, and sometimes I've been running this weapon all day. You'll get through all 8 shots, and you won't even crit. If Totally Rocking Out's not active, you're kind of screwed. Now, the accuracy on this weapon's not fantastic, but if you can get close range, there is a lot of damage drop-off, so you're going to be close range no matter what when you use this weapon. You might want to consider double headshot damage. It's a lot less consistent, it's a bit trickier versus smashers, but it will do a pretty good amount of damage if you can hit those shots. And then, of course, in this top perk, you can still run, you know, crit damage. If you're running Totally Rocking Out, that'd be a really weird way to run it. I would recommend reload speed because it's amazing how 1.1 instead of 2 seconds is so much faster than it seems. It actually does make a big difference, but double headshot, double crit damage, crit damage, those are sort of the 3 main ways to run this for damage. And then if you want to go a little extra, double damage to mist monsters and bosses could be a great way to take advantage of this weapon. Now, as for this 5th perk, there's really nothing to do here. It's got the standard run of perks that pretty much every weapon in the game has, but you can't afflict enemies with this weapon. You can't slow and snare them with this weapon, and you're not really going to be staggering that many enemies. Like, maybe you will, but I still think the only option for the 5th perk is damage to mist monsters and bosses. That's pretty much the only way to go with this. Now, the 6 perks is where things get a little interesting. You can see I've got the 30% damage to targets above 85%. I think that's the best way to go for big targets. If you're just using this weapon on its own, it's pretty much the only option. These ones are weird. They are weirdly synergistic with running a melee on the side and an animal as your primary DPS, but animals kind of suck. They need a lot more work before they're viable at the time of recording. So you could run these where if you kill a mist monster, it activates Frenzy, giving you and your pet a 25% bonus movement speed, which could be pretty fun, and attack speed. Hey, it's Editing Beast coming in here to explain the Frenzy perk in a way that was not understood when this video was recorded, which is why this video is delayed by over a week. So, when you activate the Frenzy 6 perk, I had to talk to Epic to figure this out. This is what's supposed to happen. When you activate Frenzy via eliminating 5 enemies or killing a mist monster, you and your tamed pet get a 25% movement speed bonus. That is a functional perk. That works. Anybody who's activated Frenzy has known that you run faster. That's great. What's also supposed to happen is a little bit more ambiguous. It increases your attack speed by an unknown amount for 12 seconds. That attack speed is also meant to increase your fire rate. From what I can tell in-game, your fire rate of your weapon does not increase from Frenzy. I believe this to be a bug, and it might increase your attack speed. However, the Frenzy 6 perk deactivates as soon as you switch your weapon, which is not intended. Again, I had to talk to Freight Train, our community manager, who asked QA testers and then developers of the game to figure out what is meant to be going on with this perk, and that's what's meant to happen. So, the rest of this video is going to be talking about perks where you might be switching to a melee, because I believe that to be how this is supposed to function in the future. As of this video's release, it does not work, but in a future update, it should. So, that also gives me new recommendations on these perks, because I'm pretty set on the 30% damage being kind of the better 6 perk of the two, but if you're increasing your fire rate of your weapons, it's actually a really good perk to have Frenzy on there. So if that does work in a future update, you might want to consider Frenzy. You might be saving a Corey perk in that way. However, the 30% damage is a lot more consistent, so you can kind of go either way in the future, but as of now, Frenzy is so bugged that I can't really recommend it on release. So what you'd end up doing is killing a Mist monster, or in this case, a crowd of 5 enemies, and then switching to your melee. So you'd end up in a situation where you're running a pistol as your primary build, and then a melee to kill a bunch of stuff on the side. There's really no way that I can think of that makes that super work. Like, for example, a build that I've got that I really enjoy is the Whiteout Fiona build right here. I'll move my camera out of the way once more. I'll link a couple of videos on this down below. This is a super standard build. Whiteout Fiona in the lead with Stormblade as your main weapon. You just got double attack speed on that Stormblade. Crit hits cause an explosion. This will annihilate stuff. Prickly is something I was messing with. She's a hero that came out with these primal weapons. Not a recommended support perk. Not to spoil that video, but I think we can safely remove her from this build. But this build would work fantastic on its own. And using this pistol, because it's strong enough on its own to not really need any SMG perk. In fact, as I move Luna back into this build, I might even consider putting like Beetlejuice or Ranger Deadeye back into the support, where if you use this pistol on its own with the rest of this build and then kill a Mist monster, or I don't know how you're going to kill 5 enemies with this pistol, so it's a little tough. I think the Mist monsters one is the only viable one. If you run the Mist monsters causes Frenzy perk, kill a Mist monster, and then switch to your melee, a 25% bonus attack speed to a build like this, especially with Luna in support. Maybe you want to switch off, corrosive strikes instead. That could actually be really fun. And that's kind of the essence of these best perks videos. Like, anybody could just tell you to run crit and then you're hunky-dory. But I honestly want to just share these extra ideas of how these weapons could be viable in alternate methods. There are a lot of different weapons you could run with that. I mean, there are a lot more melees than just a Stormblade. I'll link my best melees video down below because that gets into a lot further. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation where the Primal pistol can kind of be like the Jack's Revenge and the Corsair. I'm a little bit reiterating here, but there is a bit of a precedent in this game for this sort of synergy where the Jack's Revenge and the Corsair have these perks right here. As you can see, headshot eliminations boost critical chance with sword attacks for 5 seconds or 15 seconds. And the Corsair has a very similar perk where when you crit with this weapon, it'll buff your headshot damage by your pistol for another 15 seconds. So the idea with the Corsair and the Jack's Revenge is constantly switching back and forth between the two, and that's something that you can do with the Primal pistol. Whether or not it's super viable, I don't really know. As of release, it's locked to nature. I should have mentioned this a little bit sooner, but if you're going to be running this in normal missions, you typically want to pair a weapons element with whatever enemies you're facing, and when you're targeting Mist monsters, that's pretty much physical. This weapon is going to do pretty well against the Smashers, so you might want to match the element of Smashers, and I think a non-physical Primal pistol will still do plenty of damage to those bigger targets, so there's a bit of a decision to make there. If you don't understand elements, I'll link that video down below to get you guys up to speed. It's a really good video that covers all the different elemental advantages and disadvantages, and I think you should plan this weapon accordingly, assuming there's some future where there are multiple options. As of now, of course, we're locked to nature. So that's the Primal pistol. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're interested in the best perks for the other Primal weapons, I will probably have some videos up on the channel that you could check out. Subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next one, and thanks for watching. And then